Week 3, welcome back, or welcome to this movie journey across the globe. It was a nice quiet night here in Marskikale in Papua New Guinea, and I want to make a bit of progress this week, so without further ado, let's get cracking. But firstly, I wanted to have a quick recap, a quick look back at the leaderboard for the first 2 weeks. So of course we've seen 4 different countries' movies so far, and in first position is Papua New Guinea, where we are currently, but neck and neck in second place is East Timor, and then Indonesia not far behind, followed by Australia. We're going to see if that changes, how this changes, and what movies we're going to come across this week as we continue our travels around the world.
An anthropological documentary about the people of the Trobriand Islands and their unique innovations in the game of cricket.
I'm not really into cricket, at all. It's probably my least favourite sport. So I was sort of dreading this one based on the title and the fact that one of the 2 words in said title was cricket. But it was pretty decent, honestly, and I think a core part of that is how the theme of this documentary is about improving cricket, making it a grander spectacle, a bigger spectacle, and just looking at how the people from this island have woven in their sort of cultural and traditional things and ceremonies and celebration into the sport and made it their own. Now, much like my issues with the documentary Dead Birds from last week, there isn't a lot of dialogue from the people involved. It's mostly hinging around a narrator, and we know how I feel about narrators by this point. So, although it did use some, which was an improvement over Dead Birds, it still, for my tastes at least, wasn't quite enough. But if you're not bothered by that, then don't let that dissuade you from watching it. So non-Papua New Guinean filmmakers and not quite enough of the local language to justify the bonus means that my budget for the day is 500 kilometers. But a cool little thing, if you'll look, I actually today sailed past the island that this documentary took place on, which is quite cool. There it is. Bye. Hello. And I've made it to the village of Tuamoa, which is on one of the westernmost islands in the Solomon Islands, so I've only just about made it in, but I'm happy to be here. This island was also used in World War II as a base by Japan as we sort of travel through history in the area. It's one of the 992 islands that make up the archipelago of Solomon Islands, which spans 1,800 kilometers, which is this many miles. It's a great place to be for the start of the 3rd week, and it gives me a few options. I could now spring out, start mopping up some of the island nations nearby, or continue my journey south and southeast towards Vanuatu, New Caledonia, Norfolk Island and New Zealand. But only time will tell. For now, it's a goodbye to P&G Cinema, which has been a bit of a mixed bag of documentaries. So let's see what tomorrow holds and what Solomon Islands holds.
A dramatization of President John F. Kennedy's wartime experiences, during which he captained a PT boat, took it to battle, and had it sunk by a Japanese destroyer. He and the survivors had to make their way to an island, find food and shelter, and signal the Navy for rescue.
It's just the cooked fish. With a hand grenade?
In a war, you don't have time to sit around like Huckleberry Finn.
I understand. I'll be there, brother. Fuck. Hey there, brother. I'm filling in for the day. All the jokes are so corny and the movie is so cheesy and campy, but I was smiling like an idiot. The set pieces look expensive for the time, and the pyrotechnics are pretty good. It's a really interesting story about JFK's naval service in World War II, and it adapts well to a film. Despite the runtime, it flows quite well. 3.5. This ain't so hard. into the 60s today, and despite the fact that this movie is entirely about American involvement in World War II, it also takes place entirely in the Solomon Islands. So it's a great look at more recent history of the area, and although I'd love to see some stuff about the older history and the culture and tradition of the islands and the islanders of the area themselves, this was a very enjoyable and very good movie. And it was nice to break up the documentaries a little bit with something different. And seeing as we've been travelling through and stopping in at a lot of places that were used in World War II, it's quite a poignant movie to have watched, I think. And I can wholeheartedly recommend this movie if you liked the sound of the synopsis, if you like war movies, or if you're just generally interested in the time period or JFK. Ultimately, if you like movies about bros being bros, this is not a bad one to watch. My God, that man has striking eyes. And so with 500 kilometers to spend after losing 100 kilometers from the American director-writer, I have just enough movement to spend to make it to the capital city of Honiara, which is perfect because it means I'll get to pick the movie tomorrow, but more importantly, I get 150 kilometers of extra movement, which could mean a massive day, which will be a big boost for this stage of the trip. My second capital city of the whole trip, Honiara was actually developed after World War II and replaced the previous capital city of Tulagi in 1952. And it was developed near the site of some of the bloodiest battles in the Pacific during World War II, developed on the island of Guadalcanal, the largest of the islands in the Solomon Islands themselves. I said the word islands quite a lot there. It resides near the Iron Bottom Sound, a stretch of water named during World War II for the many ships that sunk there. So it kind of feels especially like a good reminder today to I don't want to say poignant because I've said that word far too many times, but it feels especially a word like poignant to have watched the movie PT 109 today, as it's, you know, it's quite, it's very relevant, but it's just a stark reminder of sort of the areas that we're moving through and their history.
Coming of age as an indigenous woman on the South Pacific Islands is a process full of change. Every island may be different, but they are connected by a shared history. Everywhere she goes, Vi is someone else, and yet she remains connected to her roots.
So Vi conceptually was very interesting. I thought the idea to tell the story through the different islands, through the different generations, was really, really good, and the messaging was great. For the first few minutes, I was pretty enthralled. I thought the energy, the pacing, the music, the camera work was really working in tandem perfectly. But I quickly realized that I was setting in for a full movie of long take, one shot, floating camera work that was quite distracting and unfortunately put a big strain on performances that weren't necessarily living up to that, and it made it so that it was quite inconsistent, because some of the scenes, the performances were great, some of the scenes, the performances were akin to a student theatre play. And today was my choice of movie, and I landed on Vi mostly because of the poster, and I didn't really want to look into it any more than that, because I love going in blind to movies. I mean, that's kind of the concept for this whole journey. So I didn't want to look too far into it. Unfortunately, that was a little bit to my detriment in this case. So I was supposed to get 150 kilometers bonus movement from being in a capital city, which I do still get, but I'm also losing quite a bit of movement from the fact that less than 50% of the movie takes place in the Solomon Islands. And this all equals out to a budget of 550 kilometers, which isn't too bad thanks to the capital city boost that sort of salvaged that and did a bit of legwork. I'm going to use all of that in a trajectory out to the open ocean today towards Vanuatu, which I should make before the week is out, probably tomorrow. One more film from the Solomon Islands, so I'm hoping that it's another good one.
In the jungles of the Solomon Islands, a biologist is attempting to do something Charles Darwin and Ernst Mayr never accomplished: catch evolution in the act of creating a new species.
Despite this vast diversity, scientists agree that every organism on the planet shares a single common ancestor, which raises a compelling question.
A question that Darwin himself never answered.
Where does species really come from?
Islands of Creation was very much a miss for me, unfortunately. The premise sounds interesting enough, but once you actually sort of get into it, you realise that it's not going to be as interesting as they've set it up to be. Unfortunately, the camera work is quite amateur, the pacing and the overall packaging of it is not very good, and this may not surprise you, but there's a narrator, and I didn't like the narrator at all. And it feels very free to air, it feels very a geography teacher has put this on for some reason, and you're sat there questioning why they didn't just put something on by David Attenborough. But they can't all be winners. And so movement-wise today I'm losing 100 kilometers from the American filmmakers, and I'm also going to tomorrow be playing catch up from the day spent at sea. So I'm going to charge forwards, and I can make it just about to my next island, my next country of Vanuatu. So welcome to Hog Harbour in the Sanma province, and it only houses around 1,000 residents. You may have already guessed this, but the name Hog Harbour comes from the early exploration days when sailors would see hogs in the bay. It was established as an early centre of Christianity by a Scottish missionary in 1897. But aesthetically, the powder white beaches, the beautiful crystal clear water, it's inspired me to want to go have a bit of a swim, a bit of a snorkel, and then a bit of a lie down. So I'm going to go do that, and I'll catch up with you in the morning. I'm glad I did that. That's really cool.
Since the end of World War II, the people of Tanna, Vanuatu, idolize an American prophet named John Frum. They believe he's an American pilot who returned to the United States after the war and will return to Tanna with riches from the United States they call the cargo. One man, Isaac, the chief of the cargo code, claims he is Frum's son.
It's hard to be alone without John Frum.
So pretty crazy premise. Unfortunately, the narrator-director is the most grating and annoying one I've come across so far, and I think that is the epitome of horror to me. There's a weird tone of superiority and arrogance through the whole thing, and I absolutely despise the fact that the director decided to weave himself into the storyline in a way that just felt so arrogant. The topic of this documentary is inherently quite interesting, but the director made a mistake in my mind by really only focusing on and pivoting around the leader Isaac, because he's a little bit unhinged. Okay, I'd like to explain. So this documentary pivots around Isaac, the leader of the religion, and this religion is very pro-America. The entire documentary, it shows they're very pro-American, pray to an American flag, they try to mimic the American soldiers they saw during World War II, and just that's sort of the foundation of the whole thing. However, there's a moment, we get a moment of serenity with Isaac on top of a mountain. He hikes to the top of a mountain, there's a big VFX moon in the background, and he has a sit down and he speaks to the camera. And he talks about how he was visited, let's just ballpark and say pre-2001. He was visited by a man in Vanuatu who told him about the 9/11 attacks that were going to occur. And the man that visited him and told him of this was in fact Osama bin Laden. And then the documentary cuts to a shot of Isaac and some of the other leaders flipping through a flipbook of pictures from 9/11, which is very odd. But that's not all, because about a minute later, still on this mountaintop with the big moon in the background, this is becoming relevant now, he decrees that America visited the moon in the 60s. However, his dad visited the moon in 1939 and met 12 prophets. And so while this is diabolically and shallowly kind of funny, it's also kind of sad, because I think that this documentary is doing a disservice to itself, where it could have really dove into how different cultures can clash at pivotal points and ripple effects into one another, and explored that and talk to more of the people involved in the religion and not just focus on Isaac, because Isaac is quite clearly a little bit insane. And it's honestly kind of sad that the documentary just decides to take the easy path of going, haha, look at this crazy idiot, rather than exploring more of that. And it doesn't really talk to anybody else, and it doesn't explore anything deeper than that. I feel like the director probably got that interview and went, I'm in. Which, I mean, it is an insane fucking claim to make, so kind of fair enough, I guess. So I'm losing 100 kilometers today from the director being American, but I'm gaining it back for broadcasting a considerable amount of local language, which is an improvement, as I've complained about many times on some of the other documentaries I've been watching. Additionally, obviously, I need to lose 150 kilometers from the travel day at sea. So I'm making a bit of a choice today. Obviously, I don't want to leave Vanuatu without having seen a second film, and I could head out into the ocean and start making my pretty much most of the way to my next destination, but instead I'm actually going to pull up short in Port Vila, the capital city of Vanuatu, which will mean I'm only using 372 kilometers of my movement today, plus the 150 from the day at sea means I've still got about 70 to 80 kilometers left over, which I'm not going to be using and throwing away. But the capital city bonus of 150 kilometers I'll get tomorrow will pretty much balance that out. And it would just be nice to see what Port Vila has to offer and get to pick the movie tomorrow. So Port Vila is actually located on the third largest island in Vanuatu, Efate, and it was once the co-capital of the condominium of the New Hebrides, which means it's got a French, British and Melanesian cultural influence to it. And you may have already guessed this, but in World War II it was used as a military base, this time by the United States. Now I'd love to stay, get into that party back there and just have some fun and kick back, but we need to have a bit of a chat about the game plan going forwards. Let's go find somewhere quiet and do that. So remember a couple of weeks ago we were in northern Western Australia and we were making a bit of a game plan about working through the islands and then slingshotting back up through Australia into East Timor. Well, I'm throwing that out the window a little bit. I've decided instead to make my way through the islands and continue to make my way through the islands in a more linear fashion. So I'm going to work down to New Zealand and then work my way back up through the outer ring of islands until I get to about probably the Philippines, and then book it south to, you know, recover East Timor, because I just don't think it's right to only have watched one film from there. I think 2 as a minimum is fine, 3 is sort of a very happy minimum, but 1 is just not enough. And I kind of knew that when I was leaving there. I don't know why I left without watching a second film, but here we are, doubling back, detouring. So that's the current plan. As it stands, we'll see how we go. And I'll probably just dig a hole in the sand here and have a sleep, in fact. So I'm very tired, very drunk, clearly. So I'll do that and I'll catch you tomorrow. So here we go.
Since the end of World War II, the people of Tanna, Vanuatu idolize an American prophet. Wait a minute, this is the same as the last movie.
Anggalmin kemutan lalakam tema kemutan mo nakateng. Maungan buka, maungan medang, kani tam nating yan.
Watching this back-to-back with God is American about the exact same subject matter is a fascinating case study of how effective documentaries can be if made well. But I won't go into all of my many gripes with the earlier documentary, but instead sing the praises of this comparatively much better film. It's shot well, it doesn't overly rely on narration, only used when necessary to bridge gaps. It lets people speak for themselves, and most importantly, it explores the people around the religion more than just following the eccentric leader that believes he met Osama bin Laden in Vanuatu before 9/11, and who believes his dad went to the moon in 1939. Both admissions they smartly omitted from this documentary. Like, yeah, okay, he's pretty nuts, so maybe let's see what the other villagers think and what other villages' views on them are. This is another area this documentary massively triumphs over the former, which plays more as an arrogant peep show. I love the exploration and celebration of tradition, and how a lot of the people there maybe don't really care all that much about the belief in John Frum, but are more just interested in continuing it to follow their traditions and culture that colonial powers attempted to rout from them. There's a really beautiful piece of music that he's used a few times in the movie that I desperately want to find. It explores the history captivatingly, the graphics are well done, especially the animations. It exists with things that surround the object, the subject, and contextualizes life and people in the area. You get to see a very young David Attenborough, and most importantly, it isn't God is American, which is a bad movie. 3.5. How does this old man do it?
A back-to-back of the same subject matter is pretty funny, but thank John Frum that I got to see this one, because it was such a marked improvement over God is American, and it pretty much addressed every problem I had with it and packaged it into a documentary that was so much better, so much more insightful, and so much more enjoyable. Obviously, I got to pick the movie today from the Capital City bonus, but I actually couldn't decide, so I just randomly rolled on the table anyway, and by chance got this one. So it was totally random. I didn't do it on purpose as a joke. So I'm up 150 kilometers today, but I actually need to pull up short to make it to my next country, my next stop in, which is New Caledonia. So the smart strategic play here is to put myself as south as possible, so I'm ready to launch into Norfolk Island and New Zealand respectively. But there is an island down here that is further south, or I could pull up short of that and land myself in the capital city of Noumea, which I'm going to do, because then that'll trigger on to another day of a bonus 150 kilometers, plus I'll get to pick the movie, which is just a fun, nice little bonus, and it's just nice to check off another capital city. So that is the direction I'm going to make, which is obviously not using up all of my budget for the day, but I think it does have better effects going forwards, and I really think I'm going to need the extra capital city boosts when I can grab them. And hello to Noumea, the capital city of New Caledonia, where you can find French bakeries, Parisian cafes, all mingled in with tropical markets and local Kanak art. This is all influenced by its French colonial history and its local Kanak culture. In 1854, it was established as a French military outpost, and as you may have guessed, it was used in World War II as a base for the Allied forces. A particular iconic building of note is the Chibao Cultural Centre, which celebrates and explores local Kanak identity and culture. So go have a look. I'm going to go have a look. Are you going to have a look? You better. You better.
A fiercely active commoner, Louise Michel is condemned for taking arms against Bismarck. Along with thousands of other revolutionaries, she's deported to New Caledonia. During her exile, Louise Michel becomes a teacher and wins the admiration of other deportees, inspiring them to rise up against the colonial order.
Felt like it was made to be played in a history class that you'd fall asleep in. It's all dialogue with no interest. Literally tell, don't show. Massive slap in the face that they take you along talking about this revolutionary who fought oppression in France, to then end the movie with a voiceover telling you about all the interesting shit you did after the events of the movie. Maybe include that in the movie? Laughing my ass off. Scenes feel disjointed and the plot just sorta keeps chugging along, hitting the beats at a languid pace.
This movie is a chapter in a larger story of this woman's life. Showing her before and after the events would have been much, much better. 1 star.
Last movie of the week, and I think my review says everything I pretty much want to say about this. It's the end of the week, so I don't really want to wallow in negativity over this film.
Comme la célèbre Louise Michel.
750 kilometers to spend is insane. That's such a good budget to have, and it can actually reach me perfectly to about 20 kilometers shy of Norfolk Island, my next destination, which means I'll definitely make it there, but I'll also definitely get one more New Caledonian film, meeting that new sort of minimum of 2 films. So I'm very happy about that, and I'm hoping there's a better film to follow, but let's find out. So one more New Caledonian film on the horizon, Norfolk Island definitely being achieved tomorrow, next week, and New Zealand very likely happening next week as well. And if I get Lord of the Rings, you know I've rigged the role. Starting the week with Trowbridge and cricket, Papua New Guinea takes a bit of a hit to their score and drops to 2nd place, East Timor taking the crowning position. Next up, we visit the Solomon Islands, which has a very strong start, but unfortunately drops to a 2.8, taking 2nd place, before ultimately taking a 2.1 in 5th place, just behind Australia. The top of the leaderboard holding its shape for now. And then we visited Vanuatu, watching the 2 John Frum documentaries. Starting weak, then rising up, not quite enough to get ahead of the Solomon Islands. And then of course we visited New Caledonia with only 1 film watched, but not a very strong start. They're going to take 7th place. So this is the current standings. East Timor in 1st place. It's been an interesting week with an average rating of 1.9, which ties with the first week and is a little bit of a decline from week 2, but we're going to fluctuate a bit, so that's fine. There's one more thing we need to take a look at. What's my movie of the week, and is it going to take movie of the planet from Crazy Desire? So it's a rating tie between PT 109 and Waiting for John. Kind of weird again that I'm tied between a documentary and a drama, but that is what it is. Quite different films, both quite good films in their own rights. I thought after watching PT 109 that it would be a shoo-in and that would just be my movie of the week. But then along came Waiting for John, which maybe just because of the juxtaposition to the much inferior version of the same documentary, but it kind of stuck with me and I had such a good time with it. And so I think ultimately my movie of the week is going to be Waiting for John. Honestly, either movie could have taken it and I wouldn't have been upset, but I think this one just stuck with me a little bit more. So this is my movie of the week. It's not going to take movie of the planet, so for once we have a different movie of the week and movie of the planet. And that brings us to the end of the week. I hope you had a good time. I certainly have. Maybe you found something you want to watch, or maybe you're just enjoying the journey. I've really enjoyed watching so many new movies and from so many new places, and I'm so looking forward to continuing this as we move towards Norfolk Island and New Zealand and beyond. So for now, that's goodbye, Godspeed, and let's get lost in this man's eyes for one last time.